Joining us now on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line, he's Howard Balzer. He's an NFL insider. You can reach him on Twitter at HBalzer721. He covers the NFL, covers the Cardinals as well, and he co-hosts weekly Hall of Fame radio show on SiriusXM NFL Radio. Howard, great to be with you always. I'm going to go right into it. The NFL Week 10 for you, what is your biggest takeaway from Week 10?
Great to be on with you, Kirk. My biggest takeaway is, can we figure anything out yet?
Right.
I mean, really, usually everyone says, well, you can't make judgments too soon when the season begins. But, of course, everybody tries to.
Right.
But then everyone says, halfway through, you should have a pretty good feel for a lot of things. But I don't know if we truly do at this point. I mean, yeah, you can see who are the good teams and, who are going to be in the hunt for the most part. But in terms of separating a lot of those teams, man, I don't know if it's even possible at this time of the year, which probably is a good thing, because the reality is when you get to the postseason at whatever point it is in January, and there's 7 teams in each conference in the playoffs, you can make a case for a lot of teams making a run at that point, because that's just the way the NFL is. So it's what keeps us riveted every week. All the close games that there always are. I mean, heck, look at the Vikings are a perfect example of what I'm talking about. They've won 7 in a row now, right? They've won 7 in a row, and every game that they've won in that streak has been a one-score game.
Howard, I want to stick with that.
That's what separates the teams in the NFL, is winning those close games.
Yeah, I want to stick with that game because I'm trying to figure it out, because obviously the Minnesota Vikings, they won that football game. And there were some mistakes made by the Buffalo Bills that we can say, hey, did Buffalo truly lose that game because of their mistakes, or should they have won that game? But Howard, I want to say this. Who won that game for the Vikings? Is it because of their head coach? Is it because of Kirk Cousins? Is it Justin Jefferson? Is it Dalvin Cook? I mean, how did the Minnesota Vikings pull that game off?
It's a great question. And what I always revert to in that question is that players making plays. That's what this league comes down to. When teams struggle, and here, I heard you leading in there about, Sean Payton. Sean Payton's going to be mentioned for every job where people perceive their team's underachieving. And so now it's being mentioned as the Chargers. And how many games would Sean Payton win with that Chargers team playing without their 2 best wide receivers? I mean, those are the realities of the NFL. But whatever players you have on the field, it's those guys making plays. And obviously, Justin Jefferson made incredible plays in that game. But it's still there for the Bills to win if they can just execute the center snap.
It seems so easy, right?
I mean, yeah, and granted they were in a difficult spot there, the 1-inch line, whatever the heck it was.
Right.
But at least, hey, if you get stuffed in the end zone on a snap because of something happens, okay, fine. But at least execute the snap. That's what this league is all about, is execution. Everybody I say this all the time, falls all over themselves, blaming the coach, whatever the situation, blaming play calling, blaming this, blaming that. Comes down to players executing. And I've always believed that. I believe it now, and I will always continue believing that.
We're talking to Howard Balzer, NFL insider, joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison filling in for Rich. But Howard, to me, has the Josh Allen MVP talk has it cooled off a lot? Obviously, for me, I had Jalen Hurts. A lot of people had Patrick Mahomes in the midseason MVP awards. But it's a game like yesterday for us to realize not only how good Josh Allen is, but there's still some of the things that he does where you say, wow, can you take some of those mistakes that ultimately can cost you a football game?
You're absolutely 100% right. And that's why I don't know who invented for the first time a mid-season awards.
It's what I do. Yeah, it's just called conversation for radio. That's what I do every single week. So I try to make up something to talk about and get people angry at me. People get mad at me. Why? It should have been Mahomes. I'm like, exactly. Relax. It's the mid-season.
I'm curious if you walk into any player's home, are there any trophies there for mid-season awards? I don't think so.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Allen's a heck of a player, obviously. But that's why they play 17 games,
right,
to see who's left standing at the end of the season. And it's why there's several pretty good candidates, just as there is for some of the other awards. Quite honest, I mean, I'm one of the 50 that vote on it,
Right.
And I tried not to engage in it too much because we all vote within 2 or 3 days after the last game of the regular season, and that's obviously when it all matters. But overall, if Josh Allen continues doing those things, all of a sudden the Bills aren't the given to go to the Super Bowl as so many did. I mean, what the heck? Right now they're in third place in their division, right? So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen the rest of the way? And that's what makes this league so fun to watch and hard to believe we're sitting here at this point in November and we've already played 10 weeks this season. It just flies by every year, and the rest of the season will fly by too.
You know, Howard, one of the things that I get a chance to do is I see you every year during the Super Bowl, and I always laugh because I give you a big hug and I always say, I know you got some difficult conversations coming because you're a Hall of Fame voter. So you're in that room when guys' fate in terms of will they be immortalized forever in terms of going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, or will they have to wait a year or two? We were having a spirited discussion before the show started, Howard, because you look at Kirk Cousins' numbers right now. And look, we don't know if the Minnesota Vikings will or they won't, but if they win the Super Bowl and Kirk Cousins has the seasons that he's having in terms of the numbers, the production, the touchdowns, is he not a Hall of Famer? What would it take for Kirk Cousins to be a Hall of Famer if he continues at the rate of play that he's going with right now?
Well, if he puts up multiple Super Bowls, then he enters the conversation. But I'll give you some guys from the past who have never even been in the conversation. And when I say in the conversation, I'm not saying people out there just talking about them, but even being a semifinalist or, of course, getting to be a finalist. And we're talking about, Phil Simms had some great seasons for the Giants and some Super Bowls there. Boomer Esiason with the Bengals. I mean, there's some quarterbacks that don't even get a sniff when it comes to the Hall of Fame. And so I think with Cousins, he will be judged certainly within the company that he keeps. And that company over the last number of years obviously has been Patrick Mahomes, who will be, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, whoever you want to mention. And there's some guys in there that we were saying, oh my goodness, it's hard to imagine them not being Hall of Famers. So I'm lukewarm on him certainly, but like I said, if all of a sudden he starts reeling off these years one after the other, which would be very difficult because no matter how good you are, it's hard to win Super Bowls. But it's going to be pretty tough for that. And we all also know that how much it matters who's around the player. Hey, you talk about a guy like Matthew Stafford. I mean, here's a guy who was looked at, okay, pretty darn good quarterback, played a lot of years, couldn't win in Detroit because the teams weren't very good. Last year, they win the Super Bowl, mostly because of the defense, but had the great drive at the end of the game. And all of a sudden, everybody said, oh, he's a Hall of Famer. I'm going, whoa, tap the brakes a little bit there. But is he one? I mean, I'd say he might be one more than Kirk Cousins, but I'm not so sure that Matthew Stafford is. So that again, is how difficult it is to crack that group. And I'll give you a quick one. We just voted this past week on our 25 semifinals for this year. It's going to be announced next week, 2 days before Thanksgiving, the 25 guys. And this was one of the toughest years I had figuring out who the 25 are going to be. The first 10, 12, 15 maybe are, okay, we know who those guys are.
Right.
But then you start looking at some of the other ones on that nominee list, and I'm saying, wow, there's a lot of quality players here. And who do you put on? Who do you not include in your 25? And I'm sure the 48 others who are voting experienced the same thing. But what it does, like I said, it illustrates just how tough it is to get into that special group that gets enshrined every year in Canton.
Well, I know it won't be tough for a couple of guys, and when their time comes to enter the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we're talking with Howard Balzer, NFL insider, here on the Rich Eisen Show. But two guys, it won't. We know they're first ballot Hall of Famers when their time does come. But who had the bigger win yesterday, Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, or Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers?
Wow, they were both pretty darn big. Certainly for the Bucs, it means first place,
right?
500 record. Green Bay obviously is still looking up at Minnesota in the division, and that's going to be a tall hill to climb in the final weeks of the season. But right now, Kirk, there's only 6 teams in the NFC with winning records, and 3 of them are in the NFC East. And so who's going to be maybe that last wild card in the NFC? That could come from a bunch of these teams that are, right around 5-4, 4-6, whatever it might be. If the Packers had fallen to 3-7, you can make the argument that maybe they're out of the picture. I mean, who knows? Crazy things can happen, but it's awful difficult to put on that great run at the end of the year. But just to remain relevant, because certainly there's a big difference between being 2 games away from 500 and being 4 games away at this stage of the season. So probably bigger for Green Bay, but Tampa Bay, it certainly solidifies them as what we all expected them to be, which is the team to beat in that division.
You know, I think in years past when you beat the Super Bowl champion, you say, oh, that was a big win on the season, right? You circle that, oh, big win for that football team. But the Arizona Cardinals beat a down Rams team, and they were without their quarterback, Matthew Stafford, but the Cardinals were without their quarterback, Kyler Murray. It's a win, and it helps out the Arizona Cardinals. But what's the latest now with the Cardinals, especially the Kyler Murray injury? Their next game is on Monday night in Mexico versus the San Francisco 49ers. What did the win yesterday do for Arizona, and then just the outlooks for a guy like Kyler Murray moving forward?
Well, one thing it does, it eliminates a lot of the negativity for a week, which we know can really be ramped up when teams lose and they don't look good doing that. And they were fortunate to beat a team, like you said, that is very down. What was significant about this game, when you talk about beyond, I'll get to Murray in a second, but beyond the 2 quarterbacks, the backups that played, is that both teams lead the league in having 12 different players start on their offensive line in the first 10 weeks of the season. I mean, both teams have been decimated in that line, but what the Cardinals were able to do yesterday with 2 new starters, two more new starters on the line, was Colt McCoy, just get back, boom, 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 3 steps, 4, whatever it is, and get rid of the football. And that was how they were able to move the ball, which, you know, Kyler Murray's a different type of guy. And so you would think that right now, again, just like Green Bay, they're closer to 500 than they would have been with a loss. Tough one against the 49ers and that defense, that you think unless Murray's totally 100%, that they'll go with Colt McCoy again, who just manages the offense very well and gets rid of it quickly, and was able to use both DeAndre Hopkins and Rondale Moore to a strong degree. They had a huge percentage of his targets, and that helped them. And plus, they didn't have any turnovers on offense, so that was big in that game. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But like I said, it was big because they're a desperate football team, but they're feeling a lot better about themselves this week, obviously, than they would have with a loss, and knowing that another loss would be featured on Hard Knocks on Wednesday night.
Well, it makes for a better episode, right, Howard? I can't wait to see this episode. I'm going to get you out of here with this question because Jeff Saturday won on a Sunday, right? The head coach of the Indianapolis Colts took care of business. They beat the Raiders in Las Vegas. I know you're a football historian, Howard. What did the win for Jeff Saturday and the Indianapolis Colts, what did it do you think, for just NFL circles, especially when it comes to the credentials and the resumes needed to be a head coach?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't see too many teams going outside the box and doing something like this on a permanent basis, but who knows? Because I think not sometimes, Kirk, a lot of times, is that owners don't think outside the box. And that doesn't mean you go out and hire guys who've never coached before, but to me, most teams, most owners, GMs, whoever, when they're hiring guys, they don't look for true leaders for that head coaching spot. They're not looking for a leader. They're looking for the hot coordinator. What's the point? I mean, just because you're great in the dark room during the week with the tape rolling and you're putting together good offensive or defensive game plans, it doesn't mean that you can be a leader of an entire roster. And that, to me, is what the biggest thing for a head coach to be. And that's what Jim Irsay was looking for in Jeff Saturday. Everything I've seen during last week and after the game was how he just established that aspect of it with his team and let all the assistant coaches coach. And boom, all of a sudden they get a nice win with Matt Ryan back at quarterback. So, and I was saying a lot of these things last week when everybody was all up in arms about how can you do this. It's an interim head coach. I mean, that's what it is. And sometimes that's good not to have a guy on your own staff, because when you hire an interim coach from your own staff, what are you doing? You're giving a whole bunch of added responsibility to a guy who already has a whole lot in whatever position, or if he's a coordinator, whatever he's doing now. It's basically a no-win situation. So he might have changed the narrative for interim coaches. I don't know about being a head coach, but I do think, like I said, that teams should be looking more for leadership and all of those things. And it's not only leading players, it's leading your coaching staff too. That's what teams should be looking at more than just who happens to be the hot coordinators at that point when the job's open.
He's an NFL insider. He's Howard Balzer. Reach him on Twitter at HBalzer721. You can also hear his show. He's a co-host weekly of Hall of Fame Radio on SiriusXM NFL Radio, Channel 88. Hey, Howard, I know I'll talk to you before then, but if not, I will see you in Glendale in February. How about that?
That's right. It's kind of a unique thing. First time in my career, I don't have to travel anywhere.
You get a home game, a home Super Bowl for you, Howard. Hey, appreciate the time, Howard. Thank you.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.